All right, so we're going to read chapter 3. Chapter 3 is a doozy. It is a little bit long, I guess. It's longer than the other chapters that we've read so far. So go get a snack and go get a drink. Make sure that you are following along with your eyeballs in the book as I read so that you can have double input, both auditory and visual. Pause it when you need to answer your questions and write it down so you can remember the things. Let's get started. As you remember from the previous 2 chapters, this is it. This is the nugget of the book. This is the whole purpose when Black Elk said, yes, I will talk to you and not that other lady. It's because he wanted to share this vision, this message that he got when he was like 8 years old, that he decided that his life was a failure because he didn't use his vision. So everything after this is only chapter 3. It's not the climax of the book, but it's the purpose of the book. Okay, here we go. The Great Vision, chapter 3. What happened after that summer? Oops, sorry, I already messed up. What happened after that until the summer I was 9 years old is not a story. Okay, so 9. There were winters and summers, and they were good, for the Wasichus had made their iron road along the Platte and traveled there. This had cut the bison herd in 2, but those that stayed in our country with us were more than could be counted, and we wandered without trouble in our land. So from years 4 to 9, just typical kid stuff. Important, the iron road, again, there's not an answer in here, but, oh wait, actually at the bottom of this text version there is, down in your notes with the asterisks. What is the iron road? If you answered to yourself a railroad, then you are correct. Okay, moving on. Now and then the voices would come back when I was out alone, like someone calling me, but what they wanted me to do I didn't know. This didn't happen very often, and when it didn't happen, I forgot about it, for I was growing taller and I was riding horses now and could shoot prairie chickens and rabbits with my bow. The boys of my people began very young to learn the ways of men. And no one taught us. We just learned by doing what we saw. And we were warriors at a time when boys now are like girls. Oh, snap. That's for you guys. It was the summer when I was 9 years old, and our people were moving slowly toward the Rocky Mountains. We camped one evening in a valley beside a little creek just before it ran into the greasy grass, which, if you look down at your notes, is the Little Bighorn River, which you may be familiar with based on, like, things that you've talked about in history class, like the Battle of the Little Bighorn, or just maps. Camping by the river, and there was a man by the name of Manhip who liked me and asked me to eat with him in his teepee. Sorry, there's some more loud things going on here. While I was eating, a voice came and said, "It's time. Now they are calling you." The voice was so loud and clear that I believed it, and I thought I would just go where it wanted me to go. So I got right up and I started. And as I came out of the teepee, both of my thighs began to hurt me, and suddenly it was like waking from a dream, and there wasn't any voice. So I went back into the teepee, but I didn't want to eat. Manhip looked at me in a strange way and asked me what was wrong, and I told him that my legs were hurting me. Okay, so one of your questions, again, I don't have the study guide, but I know it asks you to like describe the progression of like what's wrong with him. So this is your beginning. He goes in to eat, and all of a sudden his legs start hurting. So inevitably, I would assume as you're reading, you're going to be like, what kind of drugs is this 9-year-old on? And I would argue no drugs. It's his sickness, or divine intervention. Think about what happens when you get really sick. Why is it such a big deal that we take our children to the emergency rooms when their fever gets like really high? What happens in your brain? The next morning, the camp moved again, and I was riding with some boys. We stopped to get a drink from a creek, and when I got off my horse, my legs crumpled under me and I couldn't walk. So the boys helped me up and put me on my horse, and when we camped again that evening, I was sick. So there's another thing to write down for like his sickness symptoms. The next day, the camp moved on to where the different bands of our people were coming together, and I rode in a pony drag because I was very sick. You can still talk to me if you need things. Both my legs and both my arms were swollen badly, and my face was all puffed up. So there's a couple of more symptoms that you could write down. They both look good. Well, yesterday we said that you said that you wanted to wear the purple shirt. When we had camped again, I was lying in our teepee, and my mother and father were sitting beside me. I could see out through the opening, and there 2 men were coming in from the clouds, head first, like arrows slanting down. And I knew they were the same that I had seen before. I was just going to say, like, oh, we've seen them before. Each now carried a long spear, and from the points of these a jagged lightning flashed. What? They came clear down to the ground this time, and stood a little way off, and looked at me, and said, "Hurry, come, your grandfathers are calling you." And then they turned and left the ground like arrows slanting upwards from a bow. When I got up to follow, my legs didn't hurt anymore, and I was really light, very light. I went outside the teepee, and yonder where the men with flaming spears were going, a little cloud was coming very fast. It came, and it stooped, and it took me, and I turned back to where it came from, flying fast. And when I looked down, I could see my mother and my father yonder, and I felt sorry to be leaving them. So if I remember correctly, I think one of your questions is like, what mode of transportation? He's riding on a cloud. It's so cool. Okay. Then there was nothing but the air and the swiftness of the little cloud that bore me, and these 2 men still leading up to where the white clouds were piled like mountains on a wide blue plain. And in them, thunder beings lived and leapt and flashed. And I would show you, today is a perfect day to be taping this, because it's totally raining and thundering and lightning outside. So wow, what a coincidence that you probably don't care at all about. Moving on. Now suddenly there was nothing but a world of cloud, and we 3 were there alone in the middle of a great white plain with snowy hills and mountains staring at us, and it was very still, but there were whispers. Then the 2 men spoke together, and they said, "Behold him, the being with 4 legs." I looked, and I saw a bay horse standing there, and he began to speak. "Behold me," he said, "my life history you shall see." Then he wheeled about, so he turned around, to where the sun goes down. "Which way is that?" "Yes, you're right, that's west." And he said, "Behold them, their history you shall know." And I looked, and there were 12 black horses yonder, all abreast. To be abreast means to be like, to have your breasts line up, so like all lined up next to each other, with necklaces of bison hoofs, and they were beautiful, but I was frightened, because their manes were lightning, and there was thunder in their nostrils. Then the bay horse wheeled to where the great white giant lives, the north, and said, "Behold." And yonder there were 12 white horses all abreast. Their manes were flowing like a blizzard wind, and from their noses came a roaring, and about them white geese soared and circled. Then the bay, the horse, wheeled around to where the sun shines continually, the east, and bade me look. Ooh, bade is a fun word. It's past tense of bid, which we don't really use. It's a little archaic, like I bid you adieu. So I bade you adieu last night. Side note. Lost my favorite place. And there were 12 sorrel horses with, so sorrel is like a reddy brown color, with necklaces of elk's teeth. And they stood abreast with eyes that glimmered like the daybreak star and manes of morning light. And then the bay wheeled around once again to look upon the place where you are always facing, the south. And yonder stood 12 buckskins, all abreast, with horns upon their heads, and manes that live and grew like trees and grasses. Okay, so just a couple of things. Again, we're going through the 4 directions. We're using those to show like how everything is connected and the power of like the world. So we're kind of on like a plane that's this way horizontal to the ground. Soon, we're probably going to go up and down to kind of encircle everything. And remember, each direction has a color and a purpose. And right now, it's kind of being personified by horses. Cool. They're powerful. They're great. Very useful. Makes sense. And when I had seen all these horses, the bay horse said, "Your grandfathers are having a council, and these shall take you. So have courage." Then All the horses went into formation, 4 abreast, so like 4 by 4 by 4 by 4, the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins, and they stood behind the bay, who turned now to the west and neighed. And yonder suddenly the sky was terrible with a storm of plunging horses in all colors that shook the world with thunder neighing back. So I don't know about you, but like when I was little, my parents, like if it was thundering like it is this morning, my dad would say things like God is bowling or stuff like that. So again, you see like cultural stories of like what physically what happens. Okay, so thunder, blah. Okay. Now turning to the north, the bay horse whinnied, and yonder all the sky roared with a mighty wind of running horses in all colors neighing back. Horses. And when he whinnied to the east, there too the sky was filled with glowing clouds of manes and tails of horses in all colors singing back. Then to the south he called, and it was crowded with many-colored, happy horses nickering. So hashtag horses, it's getting crazy up in the air. Then the bay horse spoke to me again and said, "See how your horses all come dancing." I looked, and there were horses everywhere. A whole sky full of horses dancing around me. "Make haste, so hurry up," the bay horse said, and we walked together side by side while the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins followed, marching 4 by 4. So they're making like a horsey parade, kind of, to go talk to the grandfathers. Remember how, remember the ideas of like parades and the significance of where people are and things are standing in line up, because we'll see that again. I looked about me once again, and suddenly the dancing horses without number changed into animals of every kind, and into all the fowls that are birds, and these fled back to the 4 quarters of the world from whence the horses came, and vanishes. So these horses are like, blah, here we are, horses from all 4 sides, and then they're like, cha. They magically turn into all the animals of the world, and they're like, cha, bye. It's cool. Then, as we walked, there was a heaped up cloud ahead that changed into a teepee, and a rainbow was the open door of it. And through the door, I saw 6 old men sitting in a row. I love the rainbow door. And that's a question, too, so don't forget that. The teepee has a rainbow door. Of course it does. The 2 men with the spears now stood beside me, one on either hand, and the horses took their places in their quarters, looking inward, 4 by 4. And the oldest of the grandfathers spoke with a kind voice and said, "Come right in, and do not fear." And as he spoke, all the horses of the 4 quarters neighed to cheer me. So I went in, and I stood before the 6, and they looked older than the men can ever be. Old like hills, like stars. So they're really old. And I like how he describes them. The oldest spoke again. "Your grandfathers all over the world are having a council, and they have called you here to teach you." His voice was very kind, but I shook all over with fear now, for I knew that these were not old men, but the powers of the world, capital P, capital W. So like gods, I guess, would be an easy way for us to recognize that. And the first was the power of the west, the second of the north, the third the power of the east, and the fourth of the south, the fifth of the sky, and the 6th of the earth. So that's like a physicality that you need to get memorized if you don't have it already. We've got our 4 directions, and then up, down. Down being like earth. Or literally down for him right now, because he is up in the sky. Okay. "Behold them, yonder where the sun goes down, the thunder beings, and you shall see and have from them my power, and they shall take you to the high and lonely center of the earth, that you may see, even to the place where the sun continually shines. They shall take you there to understand." So each of these grandfathers from the different areas, they're going to have a gift to give to Black Elk, so be looking for that. I know I asked you to write it down. You need to remember, because these gifts are going to be coming back throughout the whole book. And as he spoke of understanding, I looked up and I saw the rainbow leap with flames of many colors all over me. Now there was a wooden cup in his hand, and it was full of water, and in the water was the sky. "Take this," he said. "It is the power to make live, and it is yours." So maybe take a pause and write that down really quick. From this grandfather, he gets the power. He gets a wooden cup filled with water. The water is the sky, and it's the power to make live. So as you're writing down notes, cup equals make live equals water. Math. Now he had a bow in his hands. Take this, he said. It is the power to destroy, and it is yours. So now write that down. Bow equals destroy. Then he pointed to himself, and he said, look close at him who is your spirit now, for you are his body. And his name is Eagle Wing Stretches. Eagle Wing Stretches. And saying this, he got up, very tall, and he started running toward where the sun goes down. That's the west. And suddenly he was a black horse that stopped and turned and looked at me. And the horse was very poor and sick. His ribs stuck out. Oh, poor horse. And then the second grandfather, so this is all the first one. Now it's number 2. Second grandfather, he of the north, arose with an herb of power in his hand, and he said, take this and hurry. And I took it, and I held it toward the black horse yonder, and he fattened and was happy. And he came prancing to his place again, and he changed back into the first grandfather sitting here. So the second grandfather from the north gave him an herb of power, and it like healed the sick. So 2 grandfather equals herb, maybe herb of power, equals heal the sick. You writing this down? Okay, cool. The second grandfather, he of the north, spoke again. Take courage, younger brother, he said. On earth, a nation you shall make live, for yours shall be the power of the white giant's wing, the cleansing wind. And then he got up very tall and he started running toward the north. And when he turned toward me, it was a white goose wheeling. I looked about me now, and the horses in the west were thunders, and the horses of the north were geese. And the second grandfather sang 2 songs. And I'm not going to read them to you because I don't want to, blah, blah, blah. And it's basically like, look at all these things. And now, it was the third grandfather who spoke. He of where the sun shines continually. Remember where that is? Yeah, it's the south. Take courage, younger brother, he said, for across the earth they shall take you. And then he pointed to where the daybreak star was shining, and beneath the star 2 men were flying. From them you shall have power, he said, from them who have awakened all the beings of the earth, with roots and legs and wings. And as he said this, he held in his hand a peace pipe, which had a spotted eagle outstretched upon the stem. And this eagle seemed alive, for it was poised there, fluttering, and its eyes were looking at me. With this pipe, the grandfather said, you shall walk upon the earth, and whatever sickens, there you shall make well. And then he pointed to a man who was bright red all over, the color of good and of plenty. And as he pointed, the red man lay down and rolled and changed into a bison that got up and galloped toward the sorrel horses of the east. And they too turned to bison, fat and many. Okay, so first of all, not the south. That's where the sun always shines. My bad. It's east. So from the grandfather, aka the horse of the east, he gets you should write down the morning star, because that will come back, and that's where the power comes from. The daybreak star, first person to gets up, is very lucky. And then we have the peace pipe, right? And the peace pipe, which we've seen the peace pipe before. That first chapter is the passing of the pipe, and they described it in general. But now, all the things on the pipe are coming to life, kind of. So peace pipe, east equals pipe equals, again, healing the sick. Whatever sickens there, you shall make well. So these are all the gifts. Are you writing these down? I hope so. If not, go back and pause and write them down. Okay, grandfather number 4. And now the fourth grandfather spoke. He of the place where you are always facing, the south, whence comes the power to grow. Younger brother, he said, with the powers of the 4 quarters you shall walk a relative. Behold, the living center of the nation I shall give you, and with it many you shall save. And I saw that he was holding in his hand a bright red stick that was alive. And as I looked, it sprouted at the top, and it sent forth branches. And on the branches many leaves came out and murmured. And in the leaves the birds began to sing. And then for just a little while I thought I saw beneath it, in the shade, the circled villages of people and every living thing with roots or legs or wings, and all were happy. It shall stand in the center of the nation's circle, said the grandfather, a cane to walk with, and a people's heart, and by your powers you shall make it blossom. So, grandfather from the south, where the sun is always shining, he gives him a red stick. So south equals red stick equals, again, the power to make grow. And it brings up the idea of like a cyclical life, which we're going to talk about here soon. But when he looks down, he can see like circles of teepees, which are themselves a circle, circles of his home. Okay. Hey, are you getting ready to leave?
Yep.
Okay, we'll take a pause right there.